I think AI has always been thought of as a savior kind of technology. We talked a little about how there's been some ups and downs in terms of the ability for technology to be effective in healthcare. At the same time, we're seeing a lot of new innovations that are really making a difference. But then we kind of we talked about agents a little bit. It feels like we're maybe abstracting too far, and maybe things are going too fast almost. What makes this different? I mean, in your mind, is this a truly a logical next step, or is it going to take some time?
I think there's a couple things that have happened. I think first on just the pure technology, what led to ChatGPT? And I like to think of really three major breakthroughs there. The first was new mathematical concepts of attention, which really means that we now have a way that a machine can figure out which parts of the context it should actually focus on, just the way our brains do, right? I mean, if you're a clinician and somebody's talking to you, the majority of that conversation is not relevant for the diagnosis, but you know how to zoom in on the parts that matter. That's a super powerful mathematical concept. The second one is this idea of self-supervision. So I think one of the fundamental problems of machine learning has been that you have to train on labeled training data, and labels are expensive, which means data sets are small, which means the final models are very narrow and brittle. And the idea of self-supervision is that you can just get a model to automatically learn concepts. And in language, it's just predict the next word. And what's important about that is that leads to models that can actually manipulate and understand really messy text and pull out what's important about that and then stitch that back together in interesting ways. And the third concept that came out of those first two was just the observational scale. And that's that more is better, more data, more compute, bigger models. And that really leads to a reason to keep investing and for these models to keep getting better. So that as a groundwork, that's what led to ChatGPT. That's what led to our ability now to not just have rule-based systems or simple machine learning-based systems to take a messy EHR record, say, and pull out a couple concepts, but to really feed the whole thing in and say, okay, I need you to figure out which concepts are in here and is this particular attribute there, for example. That's now led to the next breakthrough, which is all those core ideas apply to images as well. They apply to proteins, to DNA. And so we're starting to see models that understand images and the concepts of images and can actually map those back to text as well. So you can look at a pathology image and say, not just that's a cell, but it appears that there's some certain sort of cancer in this particular tissue there. And then you take those two things together and you layer on the fact that now you have a model or a set of models that can understand intent, can understand human concepts and biomedical concepts, and you can start stitching them together into specialized agents that can actually reason with each other, which at some level gives you an API as a developer to say, okay, I need to focus on a pathology model and get this really, really sound, while somebody else is focusing on a radiology model that now allows us to stitch these all together with a user interface that we can now talk to through natural language.
I'd like to double click a little bit on that medical abstraction piece that you mentioned. Just the amount of data, clinical data that there is for each individual patient. Let's think about cancer patients for a second to make this real, right? For every cancer patient, it could take a couple of hours to structure their information. Why is that important? Because you have to get that information in a structured way and abstract relevant information to be able to unlock precision health applications, right, for each patient. So to be able to match them to a trial, right, someone has to sit there and go through all of the clinical notes from their entire patient care journey, from the beginning to the end. And that's not scalable. And so one thing that we've been doing in an active project that we've been working on with a handful of our partners, but Providence specifically, I'll call out, is using AI to actually abstract and curate that information. So that gives time back to the healthcare provider to spend with patients instead of spending all their time curating this information. And this is super important because it sets the scene and the backbone for all those precision health applications.